So welcome everybody. My name is Eva. I'm part of the organizing team of Feminist Futures Helsinki hackathon. It's a hackathon that it lasts 2.5 weeks and it's online but based in Finland maybe. And we're exploring topics from urban, inclusive, well-being and eco-justice futures. And this is a talk that it belongs to our public program. So we have today with us Samar Zureik, and the name of the talk is Bridging Two Worlds: Exploring Bilingual Typefaces. So she's going to be talking about typefaces and the connection with immigration processes here in Finland. She'll show us her work. A bit more about Samar. So she's the art director of Selma Finance. Also, she graduated from Aalto University in 2020 with a Master's of Arts in Visual Communication Design and a postgrad diploma in type design from ESAD in Paris. She has previously worked as a digital art director at Leo Burnett, a graphic designer at Syntax, and a research assistant at Aalto University. So Samar, we're so happy that you could join us today, and we're looking forward to hear your work. So please, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. Thank you all for coming today. As you can already see on the screen, and as Eva has mentioned, the topic today is going to be bridging two worlds and how we explore bilingual typefaces in that setup. So today I will be discussing with you my journey into creating a bilingual typeface that has the intention in mind to be used in Migri. But I will also walk you through how I got interested in the topic and how I conducted my research where I have been doing it. I would also walk you through the process of creating the typeface, and I will show you the sample and the application of this typeface on the documents from Migri. And I will leave a little bit of space for questions. And if you feel at any given point throughout the presentation that something is unclear or you need further clarification, just stop me and I can gladly explain things as we go. But before we dive into the nitty-gritty parts, I'm gonna talk a little bit about myself. I think Eva covered a lot, but I'm gonna talk more on a personal level. So that's me on the right-hand side, and I photoshopped myself with my grandparents. And the reason I'm showing this photo is that because I have a high interest in stories and narratives, and yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but the slide isn't changing.
Okay.
It still says
then
hello, Tarve.
I'm gonna quit because that's what happens usually when I share full screen. Can you see now?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, we didn't miss out on anything. So I was just saying that, I photoshopped myself. This is me with my grandmother and my grandfather. And the reason I'm showing you this photo again is that because I'm really interested in narratives, and I'm particularly interested in my family's history and the story of who we are, where we are now, and my history, basically. But aside from that, I'm interested in Arabic calligraphy a lot. I trained for 2 years when I was still living in my hometown in Amman with a master calligrapher. And I'm also interested in illustration and type design. So where do I come from? I come from Amman. Amman is the capital of Jordan. I'm sure you all heard of Petra. Petra is basically one of Amman's, not Amman, sorry, Jordan prime tourist attraction and one of the world's 7 wonders. So if you haven't gone there, make sure you visit. It's a really lovely place. But aside from that, Amman is a really modern city with a lot of ancient ruins. And this is the Roman amphitheater in downtown Amman. And particularly why I find Amman fascinating is that you can be inside the middle of the city and you can find a 2nd century Roman amphitheater just hanging out next to you. And I find that amazing because I took this photo and I was like sipping beer on a rooftop bar next to it. So this possibility of having the old versus the new in such a small place is really wonderful. And as many other Arab capitals in the region, Jordan is a bilingual is a bilingual city, meaning we use Arabic and English in all and most of our communication. So this is like a street sign where obviously you see the name of the street in Arabic and then you see the name of the street in English. And we also use Arabic and English very much interchangeably in the branding we use and in all the materials, even official documents. And it's managed to be part of our lingo. So this is just, I took a screenshot of the chat with my mom. And the reason I'm showing that is that we're using 2 languages, but it's conducted in 3 different ways. So we use the Arabic script, but we also use the English script to write in Arabic, and we use English to talk with each other. So this form of bilinguality, I think, has been part of the way of many people's upbringing in the region. And aside from that, Arabic calligraphy and the Arabic language has a very strong connotation with calligraphy, because Arabic calligraphy has been for a very long time associated with the Holy Book of Quran. And for that specific reason, a lot of the rules in the Arabic calligraphy hasn't been modified for centuries. And I find that extremely fascinating because you could read texts that are over 100 years old because the rules have been standardized in a way that made the Arabic calligraphy unchangeable. And it finds its way in a lot of the architecture as well. So these are like mosques from Amman, and the calligraphy found its way also in the architecture, and it's extremely important. So in 2016, I left Amman and I came to Finland to pursue a master's in visual communication design. And before moving into Finland, I didn't know so much about Finland. The only thing I knew was Nokia, and that's really sad. But yeah, that was really the only thing. But of course, that with time changed. But aside from that, every year, like as an international living in Finland, to be able to work and to be able to live, I have to apply for a residence permit. So I usually go to this office in Kallio. And one time, the first year I was here, I was applying for my residence permit. And usually they leave these pamphlets lying around in papers for people who are applying for asylum or for immigrants or people who want to go back. And they were in Arabic, they were in Finnish, they were in English. And I just got one of the papers back with me. And the reason I got it back is like, knowing the time I spent in Finland, I know for a fact there's a lot of emphasis that's had been made into graphic design and into all the public sectors. And I didn't find that really reflected with the papers that were printed from Migri. And the reason why I'm saying that is, first of all, there was inconsistent use of fonts. So there was no effort to research if the font was the same on all the papers. So on this hand side where the boy is, they used Myriad Pro. Here they used a complete different typeface. And there was no effort into making the Arabic and Latin look like they're from the same family. They're like completely 2 different fonts, and they managed to put them together. Plus, there's a general lack of visual appeal in the forms, and I thought that was a bit problematic because these forms are extremely important for people to recognize, to read the information that they need to be able to understand how to move around Finland, to know how to where to apply to their papers. And that's basically where my project, or the project I was working on, was born. It was from that specific moment. So I set out to ask, how can I create a bilingual typeface in Arabic and in Latin, and to be able to use it in the public sector in Finland? And I didn't specify Migri because, well, I didn't want the typeface to be just for that. I had different goals as well, that eventually, if I want to sell the typeface, not to Migri, to any other, if I even want to open it, it still has to have a longer lifespan. But of course, my first intention was that. And I had important goals that I kept on gravitating around through the whole project, that I wanted to create a bilingual typeface in a system that portrayed cultural awareness and sensitivity. And what I mean by that point is that those pamphlets, they should act as a guiding point for people to come into the culture and not make them feel that they're outcasts, or they're not part of this change that's happening in their life. And when you research a typeface or any visual identity, and you research the history and the past, and try to find something that's somewhere like in the middle. I'm not saying the documents should look very European, but they shouldn't look very Arabic either. They should feel in a way that they're welcoming. And I wanted to create also a legible typeface, like every other typeface designer in the world. But in my case, I wanted it to allow a kind of dialogue. And finally, I wanted to have a very friendly typeface that was playful in a way that made the transition smoother into Finland and minimized any sort of friction. That takes me to the first milestone. In this project, I moved to France. And the reason I moved to France is that I wanted to focus on type design. And at that point in my life, while I did a lot of calligraphy, I had know-hows on how to create digital fonts. I was an illustrator, so it was a complete different world. And I registered this post-diploma in France, where I focused for 18 months on creating typefaces. And I was living at the beginning in a small city in the north of France called Amiens, and the school I was attending was there. And it was for 18 months where I was just sitting there with 5 other classmates, and I was working on typefaces at the beginning. And then I dedicated 9 months of that to just work on the typeface that you will see in this presentation. So that was very good, of course, because I got to kind of focus completely on this project. And most of the majority of the practical work was done in France. The theory work was then later developed thoroughly when I came back into Finland. So this takes me to the first important thing, which when I was researching about the bilingual typefaces, was that I came and stumbled upon this term called harmonization. And what does basically harmonization mean? It has the word harmony in it, but basically it's getting 2 different scripts, and not necessarily Arabic, but any 2 different scripts that they both carry equal footing in terms of design. And why do I say equal footing? Because often Latin typefaces, because of their variety and their history, often their methodology is reflected on the Arabic. And with harmonization, while there are many different methodologies, the idea is to make them both carry equal footing. So these are the different methodologies. There is no need to go into those now, because that's not the point of this. But I did work on bilateral normalization. And bilateral normalization is that both scripts, the Arabic and the Latin, were taking cues from each other. And they still were, in a way, truthful to the script. So the Arabic stayed truthful to the Arabic script, and it stayed truthful to the history, and so did the Latin, but there were points where they were influencing each other. And the second thing that I did is that I looked at different typefaces and what were other people and other established type designers were doing. And I also looked at the fonts that Migri have chosen. And the reason I looked into those is not that like using system fonts is not necessarily always a bad thing. The system fonts that are there from Adobe are important fonts. They have a lot of research done into them. But I wanted to see the history behind them and their harmonization process. So I took a deeper look into all the typefaces and many typefaces of Arabic and Latin. So when it comes to harmonization between Arabic and Latin, there are multiple challenges. And those challenges are, some of them were technological, but now I'm mostly going to discuss from a scriptural point of view. The first thing is that when you write Arabic, you write it from right to left, but Latin, you write it from the left to the right. So how can you get these scripts to look alike when they're on extremely opposite directions? And the second thing, Arabic has connected letters. The Latin doesn't, unless it's cursive, of course, but mostly Latin doesn't have connected letters. And the reason the connection is important in the Arabic because it enforces the legibility, and it's very, like, you can't read separate Arabic letters, and the letter, depending on its placement in the word, it changes. But what does that have to do with type design is that basically when you connect the letter, the spaces between the white spaces between the letter contributes to the overall color. And as you can see with the Latin, because it's so horizontal, then the white space inside is really different than the Arabic. So the overall texture of the two scripts is completely different. And another challenge is that when you design typefaces in Latin, there are five actually important lines. You have the descender line where all the letters that go under, like the J, the Y, they go on this descender line. And you have the baseline where all the lines are assorted on. You have the X height, and most of the important information in type design lies between the baseline and the X height. You have the ascender where all the letters that are like the H, the D, they match on the ascender, and you have the cap height. Some designers, they choose to keep the cap height and the ascender on the same line. It depends on the designer and their choice. But in Arabic, that is different because Arabic, you have multiple heights and you can't force the letters to fit into the Latin X height. If you do that, then other than the fact the letter would look weird, it's not really legible. You can't read it anymore. So that is also one challenge, is then how can I make the letters look like they're on the same line with each other? And one important thing which goes back to the letter connection is that because the letters are connected on the bottom, the weight distribution of the Arabic falls on the vertical line, while in the Latin it's the opposite. It goes on the horizontal line. And why is that? It goes back to the calligraphy, is that when you use a brush to do the calligraphy in the Latin, then the pressure goes from the top to the bottom, and then it becomes thinner from the top, and then it becomes thicker back again. But in the Arabic, it's the exact opposite. So it's thin, and then you press on the pen, and then you go up, it becomes thinner. So how can we match those opposite weights? And finally, which I think is really important to mention, is that the Latin has many different scripts. But as I said, because Arabic has been associated with a holy script, then the script itself hasn't been really adapted. So we have 6 different scripts in Arabic, and this is the same sentence, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is written in these 4 different scripts, so you can already see how different they look from the Naskh script, from the Riqa script, from the Thuluth. And each of these scripts, they serve a different function. So for example, the Naskh, which is the one on top, is an important, and usually typeface designers, they love to work with Naskh. The reason it's because it's a very highly legible typeface script, and the Quran, and Naskh means copying, so that when the holy book of Quran was copied, it was copied using Naskh. Diqa, on the other hand, is used to be written in small margins, written to describe commentary. Thuluth is used for bigger display, like if you go to mosques, usually it's more decorative. Naskh from the name is also for commentary. Diwani, which is the more decorative and cursive looking, it's mostly used for writing letters to the kings, etc. And Kufi, which is a very geometric typeface script, which is a very geometric script, is not actually. This has been studied recently, because a lot of typeface designers, because they wanted to achieve this monolinear feeling between the Arabic and the Latin, would use things based on Kufi. But lately they've been studying that actually Kufi, which is this one on the bottom, can't be used, because when it was initially developed, it was a decorative script. So it's not supposed to be legible. So that took me basically to the point that I wanted to develop a legible typeface based on the goals that I've mentioned earlier. So I based everything on Naskh, and I did a lot of calligraphy practices to get familiar more with the script, to get I am Arabic speaker, and I write Arabic, but also calligraphy is a different form than handwriting. So it was very important to see where, like, for example, if you look at this letter, to see where the thick versus the thin is. And doing calligraphy actually really helped me getting closer to that. But I came into a situational challenge now, is that this typeface is supposed to be used in Finland. It's supposed to be put in a place. I can't make it look very, it shouldn't look so Arab, but it shouldn't look either very Finnish. So I also had to research what has been popular and what has been used in the public sector. So I looked at case studies like the HSL, I looked at the Helsinki rebranding, and I looked at other brands from Europe, basically, that tackled with using typefaces in the public sectors. And that was important. And why was that important? Is because I was able to find specific characteristics and cues. So one thing that I've noticed is there's an extreme liking for sans serif typefaces. Sans serif typefaces are the typefaces that don't have the like Times New Roman is considered a serif font, but for example, Arial, Helvetica are considered sans serif fonts. And in Finland, specifically in the public sector, because sans are more modern and in design sense, there has been more usage for them in the public sectors. And that cue was very important to me, that I realized I need to be working also on a sans serif typeface, since my situational design is Finland. So that brought me to the deduction. I knew at that point that I wanted to work on a low contrast Arabic, and to emphasize again what low contrast is, as like I can go back to the calligraphy, which is here. Arabic is extremely high contrasted, so you have really thick strokes versus really thin strokes. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted everything to be equal. And that's what low contrast is. That is based on the Naskh script. And I wanted to match it with also a low contrast Latin humanist sans serif. And what is a humanist? Why do I use the word humanist? Humanist is a classification in type forms. And here, none of these typefaces are considered, they're more grotesque typefaces, meaning they emit and you don't see the calligraphy aspects of it. Because as I said, every type, at the essence of every typeface is a calligraphic script lying into it. But with Latin, people managed, and designers, they managed to depart from that. So I still wanted it to kind of have the imitation of a human hand, and hence why it's called humanist sans serif or humanist typeface. And my process was, and as it was recommended by my school, is to document everything. So every paper that I've printed, every note that I've written, every paper that I've gathered was collected in this folder. In this folder, you would see test sheets. I would print out all of these test sheets. I would check the spacing between the letters, check if the Arabic and the Latin, they're getting there, they're matching each other. I would check the spacing, for example, in the capitals, the spacing in the Arabic. And what's nice about this process is that sometimes 6 months, I would look at the first sketches, and then I realized that something from the first sketches was missing. So I end up kind of trying to get back some of those elements that were at the beginning of the project 6 months later. So this documentation process really guided me throughout the whole project. And also what I found helpful is to try to put the typeface I worked on the immigration papers. So what I did is that I took these papers, I stripped them from the typeface that they had before, and I put the typeface I was working on. And why was this important? It's because eventually I'm not, as a typeface designer, I'm not the graphic designer. I can't control who takes my typeface. I can't control how they're going to design the typeface. So I need to put the typeface in any setup to see if it's fulfilling the purpose it should do. And that's what I did here. I just wanted to check if the typeface was achieving the goals. And I kept doing that. So throughout the project, I would take other documents, strip them down, and put the typeface and check them out. And the process was basically, to get more into the technical part, is that I took my calligraphy, I got some tracing paper, I traced over it. But also this method, I tried with the Latin, and it worked really nicely. But still, I wanted this monolinear feeling that I wasn't still getting from my sketches. So I just got a regular pen, and I asked my calligraphy teacher in Jordan if he could actually draw all of these letters with a pen, which isn't common practice because the calligraphy Arabic pen is very particular. It has a specific slant. And he said, yeah, we can try it out. And it worked. So most of the project was actually formed from here. And I'm just showing you examples of the process and of the tracing paper, how I tried with the Latin as well to do the same thing with the tracing paper, getting this black marker felt and filling in the whole body of the letter. And I'm showing you this specific test sheet is because I remember when I was working at this, that was at the beginning of the project, I was very happy with the result. It felt like it was getting friendly, but the advice I got that it was getting too friendly. And that wasn't what I was intending to do. I wanted a typeface that at least would work for 6 months. So basically, I didn't want just like, hello, hi, welcome. No, I wanted something that could be after 6 months. It had a longer lifespan. So I had to ground the typeface after that point. So this is the overall family, which consisted of regular to black, and it consisted of the Roman, which is the upright, and the italic. And I didn't create an italic for the Arabic. The reason I didn't do that, it doesn't exist. Some typefaces, they have a counterpart Arabic, or when you sometimes press Command I on a word and then it slants the Arabic, but that's not common practice in Arabic. Arabic is not an italic form. So I didn't want to force the Arabic into that direction, and I kept true to that. And also, which I found fascinating, was the Finnish language. Finnish has a lot of repetitive vowels and a lot of long words. And I think it's a typeface designer nightmare designing with Finnish, because sometimes you're so happy with the certain letters. Like I was really happy with the A, and it was working really nice in the English, especially the A and the K. But then when I put them in a Finnish word and I showed it to my advisor in Finland, she was telling me like, I hate your A's, like they're really jumping out at me in Finnish. And I didn't actually think about that. So that was really like insightful. I kind of also had to minimize some of the decorative elements that I felt were working to make it also work for Finnish. So this is the final outcome between the Arabic and the Latin. And the way I found the harmonization or the harmony between them was in the similar ball shapes. So the ball shapes where they inspired each other. I kept this pinched letter connection. So for example, it is present in the D, it's present in the B, it's reflected in the qaf and the waw here. And I kept the calligraphic pen slant, which was exactly reflected between the Arabic and the Latin. And finally, the terminals. So how these are the end of the letters here are called terminals, and they were both reflected in the Latin and Arabic. But other than that, I tried to keep on working in a way where I kept the weight consistent, but still as much as possible staying truthful to the script. And this all resulted in the typeface, which is called Tirhal. And I still call it a typeface, not a font, for a particular reason. It's still not fully developed, and it becomes a font when it becomes fully developed. At this point, it's still a typeface. And the reason I chose Tirhal, it's because Tirhal means to travel, and it could also mean a journey. So it doesn't necessarily mean immigration. It could be a fun journey to anywhere. Yeah, so this is the full set in Arabic. And I developed all the, they're endless in Arabic because also you have all of these letter connections, which are not done by just having them on a straight angles, but I developed as much as I could. And I did the Latin and the different accented upper cases and lower cases. And I also worked on the bold in both languages. And this is how the font looks like when it's set side by side. I will walk you through now the designs that I have worked on for the Migri papers. But before that, I will just show you the overall font before in black and white before putting it with color. Yeah, so that's basically the typeface. And this is where I was mentioning that I took the documents and I redesigned them. So what I did, I tried to do this like welcome kit. So inside the welcome kit, you can find a guide about Finland. You could find if you have applied to asylum into the European Union, what you could do. I tried to work on forms as well. To working on forms is usually very interesting because it's such small spaces. But yeah, I worked on forms as well. And even simple Word documents. So just for an exercise, if someone just wants to set a regular Word document, they could use it. And these are closer ups for the guides and the forms. Whoops. This is an overall, all the designs next to each other. And I also, as I mentioned from the beginning, because sometimes you put the typeface out there with a specific intention, but if the graphic designer wants to buy the typeface, you can't really control how they use it. So I did try it out on graphic design skills, just on graphic design exercises to see how it looks like. So while it is intended with a specific purpose, it's not just for that. And yeah, thank you. That's it. If you have any questions, I am now here for you.
Thank you, Samar. That was wonderful and so interesting. I really enjoyed also going with to the process with you and how you developed it. This was so inspiring and very interesting. I was curious actually. Is Migri now using this typeface for the documents in Arabic?
No, I wish. If anyone knows anyone in Migri, let me know. I've been like emailing the communications department for like a really long time, but it's very hard to get through. But it found other homes. Like I worked with an agency here where they worked it for a museum in Tampere. So it did find different homes.
Oh,
but
nice.
yeah, it would be ideal if Migri uses it. But yeah, if that doesn't happen, that's also completely okay too.
So now if there are any people in the audience that have questions, now it's the time to ask them. I don't see any in the chat, but you can just unmute yourself and ask if you have something in mind.
I can also put my email in the chat. So if you have any question pops up to your mind later, just email me and let me know.
Perfect, yeah.
I have, it's not so much a question, just a comment. I really loved what you said about both scripts taking cues from each other. And I thought that was such a beautiful image of how, it kind of, I don't like the word integration, but in lack of a better word, integration, I think should work. This process of taking cues from each other, not expecting assimilation, but sort of, respecting and learning from each other and finding a balance. And yeah, I just think that was so beautifully represented in your work as well. So I'm really impressed.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if just until if anyone has any questions, but I don't know if we told you, but actually one of the teams in the hackathon is working with Reform Migri, which is this petition to maybe update the process a bit on how what this process works with Migri when people are applying for residencies and working permits and stuff like that. So yeah, so I hope some of those team members are here today also have seen your presentation.
Amazing. I'm gonna drop my email, and yeah, as I mentioned, even if they're not in the session concerning that project, they can email me.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Walia here. Thank you so much. This was really, really nice to, I guess, even just the whole process. But as someone who's like lived in places and seen pamphlets and like because I speak Urdu, I'm from Pakistan, and then we also have like the Arabic, like we learn to read Arabic as kids. I think it was very interesting because even within our country, there's a different version of Arabic that's used. The font that is used in the Quran itself is not exactly the same. But it was just like, it really made me reflect on how I should be paying a bit more attention to it, and makes me think back to the times in Hong Kong when at the immigration place they have these pamphlets of like all these languages, and I can read the English one perfectly well, but the Urdu one, I mean, of course I can read it, but it was just so much more difficult for me to read that. And why is it so? Just reflecting on all those things, that hasn't it been inclusive from the beginning, like the whole development of these sort of typefaces and fonts. So just sort of reflecting back on it, it was very nice to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the Urdu has actually even different letters than the Arabic one.
Yes.
Maybe I can ask you about those. I was trying to expand it to Urdu, actually, the typeface, but then I was like, I need to ask someone before I butcher it.
Sure, for sure. I mean, with the iPhone, firstly, actually, we would all be trying with the Arabic script because the iPhone provided that keyboard first. So it's kind of like people have used it, and now finally there's an Urdu keyboard, so we can use
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But also, again, the same thing. In Pakistan, we use English letters, the Latin letters to say the Urdu words as well. It's quite
Yeah.
common, like what you were showing in the beginning. So, yeah.
Thank you, Waliya. That was also very nice to hear also from your experience. Are there any other thoughts or comments? Any other people who have encountered this before, maybe have reflected on this before, at least maybe already, because I knew that this session was going to happen and we had already spoken to Samar. I realized the other day that so in my apartment, my building, they're changing the key locks of all the doors, and we received a paper saying, okay, you have to pick up the new keys in this place. And that paper was written in 5 different languages. And in the first page, you had it in the first half in Finnish and the other one in English. And they both had like different sizes, and there were like some colors and some design. And it was like everything super beautiful. But then you turned it, and it was in Somali and Russian and Arabic, but with nothing else. Like the drawings that were before and the colors that were before, they weren't existent there anymore. And I was just wondering, you know, it feels so weird because there's still the extra space in the page, no? Like why isn't the same effort put in these other 3 languages that are in the back? So yeah, it really shocked me, and also I kept thinking about this presentation and your work. So thank you also to show us more information on this topic.
I'm happy to hear that it's an eye-opener to the different scripts, because it is so many different scripts are, and I love that about Finland, the fact that from the language perspective, I don't think, like when I lived in France, it's not so easy to find any different language. I do really appreciate about this inclusivity, at least with the language. Like I received actually last few weeks ago in the post, like about the corona. It was in Arabic and many other languages. So I think there has been efforts concerning that, but I think it's our job as designers to push it a bit further.
Yeah, absolutely.
Samar, I just wanted to thank you. It was really it's exciting to hear this work. It made me think a little bit about something that goes beyond this issue of accessibility of documentation to what you're really getting at more is to inclusivity, wider inclusivity. And it also makes me think about the idea of the right to the city. Who has the right to the city? Is it so-called citizens, or are there residents and temporary workers of all kinds who have a right to the city? And if you believe they have a right to the city, then the city must make itself open to them. And that includes allowing for language to exist in the city in multiple forms, whether that's street signage, whether that's temporary pop-up information booths, whether that's, you know, playful spaces where people gather and do things. So I wonder if there could be speculative projects that people could do as part of this hackathon, for example, where we can create these speculative linguistic spaces where you have a mix of multiple languages, allowing different kinds of activities to emerge. I remember a really beautiful project by a Palestinian artist, Emily Jassir, in Venice during the Venice Biennale, where they renamed the signs of all the Venetian streets in Arabic as a kind of taking it back to kind of the Arabic times in Italy and Spain, but also had other kind of meanings. And it was just speculative and fun. But it just made me think of that, kind of going a step beyond your initial sort of provocation.
Yeah, that's a very lovely thought. I don't know actually that project. I'm curious. Emily Jasser, is that the name of the artist?
I mean, this is a big problem in Israel-Palestine, where you're supposed to have Arabic as a second language, as a bilingual. Israel has to allow for that, but it often is not done very effective. It's not made accessible, and so there's actually it actually becomes a political project to insert language into the city, and that's kind of what I was thinking also about your work, even though it's not addressing just about transition languages, is going beyond that to actually make it accessible and aesthetically engaging. So, but all of those thoughts came to my mind, the things that we take for granted, actually, for someone who's a foreigner, can be quite challenging and uninviting.
I think Koto had a question, or he started to talk, but we're not hearing you.
Oh, awesome. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Maybe.
now we can hear you.
Right. My internet is quite poor, so I will not abuse of it. But I just want to say thank you for this very refreshing session, Samar. I think it's really important what you have been sharing with us, not only as in the matters of the outcomes, but also taking us through the whole process. And I really feel very, very close to concepts like, reducing friction or increasing harmony, or what Henriette was trying to elaborate with. What is it? Integration? Is it the merge? Is it a combination? Is it symbiosis? I mean, whatever it is, it starts from a place that it's like genuine empathy, right? And in a way, I guess we're very privileged to be able to intellectually, roam around these concepts right now, because it seems that we have water and electricity and so on. I mean, I want Samar I want you to give us your thoughts about these ideas, and if you can develop a little bit more on what's the role that typefaces, fonts, or words by all means can have as an impact in the future. I mean, when we say, hey, let's save the world, let's imagine a better future, we rarely point out to font designers. And I get very pissed with that, because I strongly believe that that's a place where, because we're not looking at, perhaps it could offer us certain keys, right? So yeah, and I wanted also to ask you why fonts and not something else. I believe it's a very what is it, that it requires such an attentiveness that it's almost religious, but in a sort of futuristic way. I really like it, and I really enjoyed your talk this morning.
Thank you. So just to clarify, you wanted to, you were asking why I chose to work on fonts. Was that the question? Right. As you said, you were coming from, in a way, different streams of design, and then you said, oh, I want to do fonts, and then you said, I want to do fonts within this intersection, right? Which is exactly where we're. Yeah, it's a very good question. I still ask that myself every day, but I think the reason, when I already had a strong affinity to letter forms, especially in Arabic when it came to calligraphy, and letters are drawings, letters are illustration. And I think the reason you were mentioning people don't give them so much attention, it's because the designer who designed the font actually did a good job. I think the moment that's actually quite interesting, because if you're trying to read a book and then the font stood out so much, then the designer did a bad job. And the way typefaces are designed, they're designed to be invisible. Actually, they're not designed to be present, unless you want to display a typeface where it's screaming out loud and out there. But yeah, the reason I did choose typeface, it was a curiosity that I wanted to venture into. And before I got actually deeper into it and decided to pursue a post-diploma in it, I went to Paris for a short program, which was called Type Paris. And I immersed myself for 5 weeks in type design. And I had no idea at that point how to create Latin typefaces. And calligraphy, typeface, fonts, lettering, they're all completely really different disciplines. So when I did that, and in those 5 weeks, I was just doing these black and white forms, I really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much that I could sit for like hours working without even noticing. And I think when you sit on something that long and you're just, it was, I would say, meditative for me. It was like therapeutic. I was just like mesmerized by like going so deeply onto the lines of the letters. And so that I think it was more of a passion when I decided, or curiosity. And then after the course, I realized that I like it a lot and I wanted to pursue a more like in-depth program about it.
Right. I mean, that's really inspiring also in terms of, say, creative drive, because it wasn't your familiar go-to place, right? And I think that's really important, as I see that languages are like they're like a bridge, right, between us and I just wanted to comment. The other day I read somewhere this idea that we cannot understand a language if we at least don't understand two. And I really like it, because you learn one language by default, I guess, if you have the means, but then the second one requires something else, right? And some people learn it because, well, it's at school, but some people, you know, have a different case and they really make an effort. And that's put myself in the middle. It's as important as having the other one coming here to the middle. And it's sort of romantic in a way, but I believe it's what I was hearing a little bit while you were narrating this relationship between the two, in a way, realms of words. So yeah, thanks again. It's inspiring.
I'm glad to hear. So yeah, I do agree about when you learn, at least, I don't know, and people from my part of the world, we take learning the second language for granted because we learn it at the same time as learning the first language. It's unfortunate and true, but I would probably read a book in English much better than I would read a book in Arabic, because the way we've been educated at school at such a young age is that we have them at the same time. And that's unfortunate in a way, because I never got to experience the process of learning language. And now I'm learning Finnish. And I've been learning it for a year, and it's a complicated language, but also because I didn't know the process of learning a language. I didn't understand the grammar, where it comes in, how to make the sentences. It was frustrating. So it is like, I think it's a beautiful long process. But I guess once you're familiar with the process of learning a new language, then you can just make a model and readapt it to the different languages you learn. And I find it fascinating because European people usually, they have their native tongue, and because they're surrounded by so many countries, they most of the time they learn a second language at an older age, and they manage to even master it at an older age. And for me, that was a myth. Like, it's either I learn it when I'm 5 or I never learn it. So
are there any more comments or questions from the audience? No? Yeah, well, then I think we will just say a big thank you, Samar. This was really such a great session. I was like watching your presentation, like, wow. Personally, also for me, kind of coming from design background, now not doing so much design work, it was like, yeah, I just really enjoyed watching the process. And yeah, we'll try to help you, push this into Migri, because I really think
I hope so. If anyone has any connection, just email me. Or if they know someone there, I think it would be easier. But yeah, thank you so much. This was really lovely. And yeah, my email is in the chat. If you have any question later that pops up to your mind, just let me know. I can also share the presentation with Henriette and Eva, so you guys can keep it there. And if you want to also circulate around, it's also fine.
Yeah, perfect. That would be great.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you so much, Samar.
Great seeing you guys. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for hearing my talk, and
Of course.
hope to see you in person. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
See
Bye.
ya. Bye.